Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind. We are back once again. It is the 96th episode of this thing we do. Niles, how have you been the last couple weeks since we last recorded?
Good overall. It's leaf peeping season here in Colorado, so had a nice mountain getaway camping trip to go check out some of those leaves recently, which is nice. And
Nice.
yeah, it's been good. But sometimes working late just frustrates the hell out of me. But that's just adult life, I guess.
Yeah.
How have you been doing?
Pretty good. Seen a couple movies, been watching some fun stuff, which we'll talk about later. And other than that, yeah, like you, just work dominating everything. It seems like it never stops these days.
Yeah, right. All we do is work. It never stops. It never stops.
It really doesn't. But we are here once again to review a film. This week we are looking at Megalopolis, written and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Megalopolis is the decades in development passion project of Coppola's and stars Adam Driver, Nathalie Emmanuel, Giancarlo Esposito, Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, Jon Voight, Lawrence Fishburne, and many, many more. It is quite a star-studded cast. The film follows Adam Driver's Caesar Catalina, an architect who envisions a utopic future for the city of New Rome, as he butts heads with the city's mayor, Cicero, played by Giancarlo Esposito. The film was self-financed by Coppola himself. He sold a chunk of his winery to pay for the $120 million film. We are going to get into non-spoilers in a moment, but we are a movie podcast. We are also, politically leftist progressive people. So we have to talk about the controversies of this film first. We're going to do that right off the bat, and then we're just going to talk about the movie after that point. But there is some stuff that should be addressed. So
yeah, there's been some lots of controversy, stuff that I wasn't aware of until you pointed it out when we went and saw this movie yesterday, Dylan. So this is all lots of news to me, and it is not pleasant news. So yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, and one thing I think for both of us, that the reason we want to talk about this other than just our political leanings making it warranted is we have friends who work in this industry and around this industry. What happens on film sets is important to us personally because it might one day negatively affect people we know and care about. So if you are listening at home or why the fuck are they talking about this? This is a movie review. It's this is why. This is part of our perspective. But
yeah.
We'll be quick so we can focus on the film itself as a piece of art. So first things first, Coppola's behavior himself on set, and support for his apparent mentee, Victor Salva, who is a convicted sexual predator, which sucks. But okay, allegedly Coppola would pull women onto his lap and try to kiss several of the scantily clad extras in one club scene to, quote, get them in the mood. This was reported by Variety. Statements have been issued saying that all of this is false, and Coppola apparently is filing a lawsuit for defamation against Variety. Look, maybe he didn't do anything. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. But I read the first few paragraphs of the lawsuit, and the main thing they were saying was well, your sources were not reliable because everybody on the production signed NDAs, which, if that's your leading argument, that doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence in me to believe you.
Yeah, it's kind of a gross legal loophole there that they're trying to get around if they can. And
yeah.
I mean, that kind of behavior is, if it wouldn't be acceptable in any other work environment, it should not be acceptable on a movie set.
Right, exactly. And apparently he also got high in his trailer a lot before filming. It's that part, whatever, don't care. That doesn't.
Yeah.
That
I'm
adds
sure
up. Yeah.
That adds up. From what after seeing this movie, it's like, yeah, once you see it, you're like, yeah, this guy was high.
Yeah, and like what you were saying, like if what Variety alleges is true, it's entirely unacceptable. Like you said, a film set is a place of work, and Francis Ford Coppola was the boss of that place of work. The thing was financed by him. He is the director. He is the writer. If it didn't happen, awesome, amazing. But if it did, it's an abuse of power. And his status as an incredible and legendary filmmaker doesn't change that. It is what it is. Like, you know, you said, if it's not acceptable in an office, it shouldn't be acceptable on a film set. We're making art, not enabling abusers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But also, you have Shia LaBeouf cast in this film. He is currently awaiting trial for physical and sexual abuses of an ex-girlfriend. Dustin Hoffman being cast despite being accused of sexual assault and harassment of a minor when he was filming Death of a Salesman. And Jon Voight, big Trump guy, and also has a really contentious relationship with his daughter, Angelina Jolie, been publicly shitting on her for her support of Palestine and, criticizing Israel for doing a genocide and war crimes, which they have escalated even as recently as this week. Apparently, she has cut him out of her life entirely. I don't know more details than that, but it's like, in regards to all of this stuff, when asked, Coppola said, quote, "What I didn't want to happen is that we are deemed some woke Hollywood production that's simply lecturing viewers. The cast features people who were canceled at one point or another. There were people who are arch conservatives and others who were extremely politically progressive, but we were all working on one film together. That was interesting, I thought." And I think that's a little reductive of what we just went through, because I agree with the words he said there. Yes, all of us, regardless of political beliefs, can come together and make something beautiful artistically. But like, that's all fine and good. Different political beliefs should not disqualify you from getting work in an industry. But I think there's a little bit of a difference between being a Republican and being a sex criminal.
Oh, yeah.
There are plenty of actors who are not sex criminals, but are conservative. I don't know. I don't like a lot of this, you know?
Yeah. Well, it is. It's just like what you were saying. It is one thing to, have political opinions, but when you are behaving inappropriately on sets, you have this history or these allegations against you, you have these trials that are awaiting you. Is that ethical to bring them on to the production?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't think so. But
and it speaks to like, okay, well, it reflects on you too and your art, because you are signaling who you want to work with. And why not cast a Republican who's been canceled who hasn't done crimes? I don't know. Seems possible.
There's plenty of options out there. Yeah, you've got options, and I don't know. I think like the whole culture wars shit is bullshit anyways, and whether a movie's woke or not is like, maybe it's a matter of opinion, maybe it is woke, but I feel like it's just like inflating things for the sake of controversy in a way. When people are like being like, "Oh, it's woke, it's gone woke," it's like it's just calling it like it is.
It's outrage bait, and whether or not a piece of art is woke in the minds of the people who complain about that sort of stuff, right? It's just like, they aren't talking about the themes of the story. They're talking about if a black person's in it. Like, if a black person's in it, it's woke. If a woman's in it, it's woke. Because the people who say this shit are stupid. But in this, it's like, it almost feels like Coppola is doing the opposite of what like Kathleen Kennedy did with Star Wars like ages ago. Remember, where she's like, we're going to make an effort to hire a lot of female directors and writers. And then they released the slate of directors. It was like all men. But then it's like, it just goes to, it's like, just do it. Just do the thing that you want to do. Don't make a weird sounding announcement and make it a statement. Like, if you want to work with people who are a little bit controversial because they're incredibly talented, just do it,
Yeah.
just cast them. You'll be criticized for it, but you say, Jon Voight is a very talented actor with a long and storied career, and I wanted his talents in my film. You'll be criticized for that, but you could just do it, and you wouldn't have said something stupid. So enough about that, though. Let's talk about the movie itself going forward. Some of this will come back in the conversation just as it affects the actual art. But what are your initial non-spoilery thoughts on Megalopolis?
Initially, I am confused. I am slightly frustrated, but I'm also in awe of it. I think as a whole, Megalopolis, I liked it, and I'm glad it exists, because if you guys listen to this podcast, one of the things that I really look for in new cinema and things like that is originality, and there is plenty of that around these days, but I don't necessarily want everything that I watch to be a sequel or a continuation of a story. I want original stories to watch and to explore, and this is absolutely one of those. Like, Megalopolis is very original, and from a visual standpoint too, I think this movie is a masterpiece, because the aesthetics are just immaculate here. They're just harkening back to these days of Rome, obviously, because this whole thing is about like New Rome here in the city.
Yeah, it's New York as Rome, which
yes, exactly, it's New York Rome. But like, all the visuals are really cool. I think the costumes are gorgeous. Like, I love how everyone looks like they're like from ancient Rome, but all modernized. Like, I think that's just really cool. And the environments are stunning. Even like the ones that are obviously like, that's CGI. Like, there's no way that was there. And it just, it kind of looks like that, but it also looks really nice, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very artificial, but in a way that doesn't look bad. I think I think it works. It's because the movie is very theatrical, almost feels like it's on a stage. And so I think the artificial nature of the special effects kind of just adds to that. It looks like the backdrop of a very expensive stage.
Yes. Yeah, that is so true. That is absolutely true. Like, when they're up on the skyscrapers, it looks like, that's just like a background in New York, but it looks more 3D and lived in. But yeah, even like the shot composition, like how they play with colors, is just very amazing. So I think visually it looks great, and it needs to be recognized for just how fantastic it looks. And I think the movie did take a lot of big risks and explores a lot of themes ambitiously and lots of motifs, so props to that. But I think it also bit off a little more than it could chew at some points. I think there's a lot of things that bother me about this movie too. I think some of the characters don't feel like real people. I feel like they feel one-dimensional in a way, and I feel like there's moments where the movie drags a little bit. And I'm also a little bit of a stickler for continuity details, and when all of a sudden someone is like positioned one way, and then the exact next shot they're positioned in an entirely different way, it pulls me out for a moment. And it's a silly thing to get hung up on, but I do get hung up on those things. And I think the story overall, it would oscillate between, or when I was watching it, I felt like my thoughts were oscillating between, wow, this is so profound, this is very thoughtful, this is brilliant, and then I'd be like, wow, this is incredibly pretentious. But what about you? What are some of your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so I've now seen this twice, and I will say I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about it. I, like you, I think it's fascinating, and I am glad it exists, but it's also very uneven and full of strange creative choices that do not always work for me. And I went into this very much along for the ride. I was like, I want to see what this is, and I want it to work for me. And there are a lot of moments where it does, and there are some moments where it really does not. I will say there are a lot of fun acting decisions going on throughout the movie, but there are also moments where it feels like the performers are in different rooms and in different scenes. And from what I've heard, a lot of improv was encouraged on the set, which is fine. You know, sometimes that works really well. And I think I've seen this comment several places, but in the Weekly Planet, they mentioned it too, where it's like, it feels like when you're in an improv scene and you and your scene partner are having like tensions in where you want the scene to go and you aren't really aligning. And so there is like what feels like bad improv, or a character will just respond to a criticism by launching into a Shakespeare soliloquy. Not an approximation of Shakespeare, literally to be or not to be. And it feels like, what the fuck? What? So there's stuff like that. But I also, I liked the music overall and the sound design, as well as the set design. I thought was great. And the costumes, which you mentioned, are like a combination of modern suits and Roman togas and sort of accents and stuff like that. That was really fun. But yeah, and like Coppola has been working on this as a concept in some form for, I think, 40 years. And I think that really shows in the finished product, but not necessarily in a good way. It feels like the story has gone through many, many iterations, but remnants of older versions of it are still cropping up, even if they don't fit into what the current version of the film is. And let's see.
I get that too, though. I feel like it's very polished and well put together. It's very competently made. But you can see those kinds of like small things where it's like, that line of dialogue feels like it was like the third draft or something like that. Like very very small things, but like they just kept it in for some reason.
Well, it like reminded me in moments of, you know, back in the day in school when you'd be writing a paper for like a class project over a long period of time, and you'd go back to one of the paragraphs you wrote early on, and you realize, oh, the nature of this paper has changed. Like, I don't remember what I was trying to say here, and it doesn't really fit with my thesis anymore. It felt like there were some things like that in this movie. And beyond that, I think, I don't know if the movie has as much to say as it thinks it does. Lots of people are giving very dramatic speeches without asserting much of anything, and lots of emphasis placed on the importance of asking questions, which we're going to touch on later in spoilers. But the film loves to talk about how important it is to ask questions. And I just want to leave that sitting here for now, because we're going to talk about that a lot in spoilers.
Well, I definitely agree with that. Because, one of the bigger things for me is that I think this movie, it's not clear what it wants to say. And I think the movie thinks it's more clever than it actually is.
Yeah.
Because what is the message of this movie? Is it a commentary on the progress of civilization or lack thereof? Is it an examination of like why Rome collapsed, or is it suggesting that we're on a similar track in our?
I think more the latter, but
reality, or like is it like trying to talk about the hubris of man? Like there's a lot. It's like it feels like it's spread a little bit too broadly on trying to cover a lot of different topics, touch on a lot of different themes without having a ton of substance.
And I think the confusion about what it's trying to say might even go back to the fact that he's been working on it for so long, because I wouldn't be surprised if at different points in time the movie has said different things and gone in different directions, and now because it's like an amalgamation of half a century of creative work, like it feels confused because the story and the themes have changed over the course of time. I will say though that it feels very personal, and you can see a streak of like an artist frustrated with the studio system that in Coppola's case he tried to change and failed to change many decades ago. And like sort of expressing the frustration of like, well, if you guys, like the studio, the government would just get off my back and let me be creative, I can make something beautiful and special. Like that's definitely a part of this. And I do respect Coppola creatively for basically doing that, saying fuck it and paying for the whole thing himself. And I'm glad for the creative freedom that allowed him. And this is like a really unique situation that this even came out at all, that it exists in the way it does. And I think I have a lot of issues with it, but I enjoyed watching it, and I'm happy that a filmmaker as legendary as Francis Ford Coppola finally got to make this dream project, even if it isn't entirely something that works for me.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see him come back and do this film. And I mean, he's done a lot of great films over the years. You know, obviously The Godfather comes to mind, and
Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now, yep, like some of these really great cult classics. So yeah, maybe this film Megalopolis, give it a few years, I could see this being a cult classic over time, similar to his other movies, and people will be visiting it and saying, "Oh wow, yeah, there was a lot here that I didn't get on like the first time I watched it." But
yeah,
maybe not.
And like where I do think the film is pretty, or it falls short in its narrative and themes for me, but I think where it has its strength and pushes boundaries is on form and craft. And I would normally say this is a spoiler, but it was very widely publicized, and it's not even in most versions of the movie. But in the festival circuit and in the IMAX experience, there is a scene where an audience member is meant to get up and ask Adam Driver's character a question, and he responds. There's a part in the movie where Adam Driver is on a smaller version of the screen. That is that part. Yeah. There's like an off-screen voice asking, like, I have a question for Caesar Catalina. In those screenings, a person in the audience is standing up and asking that into a microphone. And it's...
That's
it is
an interesting idea. I like that. Interactive.
Yes. So it's like, I wish I had gotten to see that, because I think it would have added something to the experience. As is, it's just a standard scene on a smaller portion of the frame, but I found that really intriguing that he is trying to push a boundary to outside of the frame in that. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, that's a neat idea, and yeah, that's gotta pay respect for that. That would have been cool to see someone in our theater stand up and say something rather than stand up and leave.
Yeah, those two people did leave like 10 minutes before the end of the movie, didn't they?
Yeah, I was like, you can't wait another. It's almost over, and they missed the best scene of the movie, which we'll get to.
That's another thing before we go into spoilers. Like it's funny. Intentionally funny. There is comedy in it, and the jokes, when there are jokes, I would say land. It's pretty humorous.
Yes.
In addition to being very strange. But do you want to do spoilers now?
Yeah, let's jump on in and talk a little bit more freely about this movie. So I mean, one of the first things that I wanted to talk about was this idea of utopia, because Adam Driver's character Caesar, he's very idealistic. He wants to kind of push things to this utopic level and create a great society for everyone, which is a great vision. And the word utopia, it comes from Greek, and it means no place.
Yeah.
And utopia is an oxymoron, because it means no place in Greek, but we colloquially use it to refer to a place of like ideal perfection, a place where there's maybe no work at all. Like you everyone's got housing, everyone can eat, everyone's got like things to fill their time with, everyone is in perfect health and no one ever dies. It's a utopia. It's like perfect for everybody, but it's an oxymoron because it's like, well, that can't actually exist. There's no such thing as a utopia because the very idea of it is contradictory to the nature of humanity. And for a lot of other reasons, but like for instance, humans crave conflict. There's no conflict in a utopia. We want agency. Everyone wants agency. Everyone wants something to do. Everyone wants to have their own free will. But we don't want to be the targets of other people's agencies. We don't want other people's agency to overflow onto ours and get in the way of what we want to do. And there's plenty of people who want to lead a life of leisure and do nothing and not work, but we also want purpose and we want to be satisfied with the things that are going on in our life. So it's like, I like that they brought up this theme of utopia in this movie, because Caesar's he's this genius. He's this architectural artist. He's ambitious. He's reaching for these utopic ideals. You can see that. But it's something that can never really be achieved. So I'm glad that they started to explore this. I kind of just wish they dug a little deeper into that. This topic,
Yeah, and I think we'll circle back to this because I have some notes towards the end about utopias as well. But I think like utopia is almost in the eye of those creating it and living in it. Like it could be what you described, but also it could just be a society where everyone's needs are met and you have more, you don't have to worry about like starving to death and putting a roof over your head or something like that. Like it doesn't mean nobody works ever or like has, complete free reign to do whatever they want. Like that could be someone's idea of a utopia, but I think that's why the subject of utopia warrants more discussion, as Caesar Catalina would like to have happen, which I want to save that for later on. But speaking of Caesar and Cicero, our two foils for this story, one, I want to make like a very surface level comparison because extremely surface level. I have not read Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, nor will I because Ayn Rand is yuck. But I watching this, I did get some, light parallels between Catalina and the protagonist of that because both of them are like sort of architects fighting against the government or government figures because they want to build this thing that they just aren't being allowed to build for whatever reason. And again, surface level, probably a bad comparison because I haven't read the fucking book. But I just thought of that a little bit and I wondered, like, is this an intentional connection? If so, how does Coppola integrating Randian, fiction into this quest for utopia reflect on that utopia and what it would necessarily be? But I would have to read the book to make an educated comment on that, and I'm not going to. So,
I'm not going to read that book either. But if someone has and they're listening, please let us know what your thoughts are. But Caesar and Cicero, they're kind of these opposites in this movie, and that's how they're positioned, like the artist and the mayor. And eventually they come to terms by the end of the film. They shake hands. But, they start off very much polar opposites. Caesar's an idealist, chasing utopic dreams for society. And Cicero is happy with the status quo. He's a little greedy. He's kind of like, I'm just focused on the now, and I'm not thinking about the future. But Caesar is. And I think that they worked pretty well as opposites throughout the movie. I think out of all the characters, they feel the most fleshed out and
Yeah.
most well-rounded, but I still kind of had this difficulty connecting with Caesar ultimately. And maybe this is just me, but from my perspective, for like the entire movie, he, like, maybe with an exception of, like, the third act, but for the bulk of the movie, he acts like a careless, drug-addled workaholic and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really care about loving people or spending time with people he cares about or anything like
Yeah.
that. Like, there are moments where he's humanized, and you can empathize with him, like when we learn about the death of his wife and
Mm-hmm.
how he's coping with that, and struggling with it. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I just feel like there was something missing for me, some kind of human element with him.
Yeah. One thing on Cicero I really loved. He's the mayor, but like there's the one
Mm-hmm.
scene where Julia goes to see him with the birth certificate thing, and she enters into his office, and his desk is like crooked and buried in sand, sort of like
Yeah.
his institution is failing and being buried by the sands of time. I just thought that was a neat little visual.
Yeah.
I also loved the framing in the scene later on where after it's revealed that Julia is pregnant with Caesar's child, Cicero sort of goes hat in hand to his office. Is like, I just love the way they're framed there because Caesar is sort of like looking out of frame on the same side of the frame where he is. He dominates the space. Like there is
Mm-hmm.
no ground given from him. Whereas in contrast, Cicero is smaller on the right hand of the frame, looking frame left. I don't think that's how you're supposed to say that, but it's like you can tell they're dynamic because Cicero is more vulnerable in this moment,
Mm-hmm.
and he's surrendering sensitive information. Just a good scene. I liked it.
Yeah. Well, and that shot was beautiful. That whole scene was fascinating
Mm-hmm.
because he's like, I just can't have you be the father of my
Yeah.
grandchild. Like, he's just like, he just can't have it, and he's like willing to just like sacrifice his entire career
Mm-hmm.
basically to just like get Caesar out of his life and away from his family. It's like, wow, that is
Yeah.
such a big risk to take.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, just shows like how little control he's realizing he has as a mayor
Mm-hmm.
right then. Like,
Well,
this it's fascinating.
well, and what was weird about that too was the deal was like, here's your insurance policy. I'll support
Mm-hmm.
you. Just like stay away from Julia and the child. And I guess he does because there's a time skip and the child isn't born yet. She's just way more pregnant. And then she's like, "Oh, I'm going to go say hi." And that's when Caesar gets shot. So I guess he does honor the deal, but we skip over the part where he's honoring the deal, so it feels like Cicero just gave him everything and got nothing in return.
Yeah, it really did there. Well, that's
and-
like, that's one of the things too with this film, is just like, I feel like it glosses over time periods really quickly. Like, a lot of stuff will happen in like the span of a day or two,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, time jump, 5 years or a year or something like that. It's like, what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just going back to the dynamic between the mayor and Caesar, it's like Catalina in that scene where they're like on the wood walkways above the model. It's like he's like, I care about the future. Like, why are you caring about the now? And he's like destroying people's apartment complexes just like willy nilly, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? And then in contrast, though, you have Cicero, who's like, people have needs now. They need to be met and like fed and housed. And it's like,
Yep.
he's right. But then his solution is like, let's build a casino. Like,
Yep.
what are you doing too? What?
Yeah. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah. I kept thinking throughout the movie, like, I'm not a city planner, but I wonder how mad any city planner would be watching this movie to just be like, why are they doing this way?
Yeah.
And it just confounds me too that it's like, that scene too. They demolished that space, so now there's this vacant lot of land, and it's like, why was there not a established plan? Like, they're talking about what to do with the empty space right after they knocked over the buildings.
Yeah, and I guess Caesar had a plan, and it's under his jurisdiction as the head of the design authority. But it's odd, and like we should also remember, it's like the movie is called Megalopolis, a fable. So maybe not everything is meant to literally make sense and line up. It's a fable, like a children's story to teach a lesson. We'll come back to that, because what is the lesson? But it's like some things fade in and out, I guess, because that is sort of fable storytelling. You know, the elements that are relevant for what you're talking about are important, and then maybe they're not later on, and that's okay. I will say, in terms of chemistry and a natural feeling relationship, Driver and Emmanuel had pretty good chemistry, and I think Julia and Caesar's relationship honestly kind of works as one of the central parts of the film, and it's a genuinely sweet moment when Caesar realizes they're going to have a baby. Like, it's with a character like that, you kind of don't know how they'll react to that news, you know? Like, a lot of characters of that personality might be like annoyed at the inconvenience of a child or something like that, but it's like, no, it's just like genuine joy, and you find out more context as to why as the film goes on. Like, his previous wife had good news. She'd finally gotten pregnant when his mood swings drove her to drive away and accidentally or on purpose drive off the bridge. We don't really ever
It is so vague
what happened with that.
It is so vague, but and the whole, like, because I'm just getting so many flashes of visuals right now. I really liked, just to deviate really quickly, that there's like a visual depicting like his dead wife underwater.
Yeah.
And then it turns out to just be a lot of people with like body paint, and they just turn over like to become rocks in the river. I thought that was so cool.
That was really neat.
Such a cool visual. But I digress. Yeah, I agree. Their chemistry was great. And yeah, it was one of the brighter parts of the movie that I did enjoy. And I really liked, a lot of their scenes together. I thought that they were just fantastic, and they played off of each other really well. Like that first scene where she comes up to interrupt his breakfast, and they're just like so back and forth, really well.
Go back to the club.
Go back to the club. Such great delivery. Go Kylo. I love my Kylo Ren. He's doing great these days. And one of my favorite scenes of the two of them too was when like it's those they're walking on the steel beams above the city, and Driver's character Caesar, he's just like, I don't have the power to stop time anymore, but she helps him regain this ability to freeze time. It's because he gave him hope, and I thought that was really beautiful. And she's got this great line in that scene, which is honestly such a breathtaking visual too, but she's talking about how great artists are able to freeze time because their works of art are stills of those frozen moments, and that just felt very poetic and powerful for this film.
Yeah, and that scene specifically was one of the ones that came to mind when I was talking about how the CGI, the way it is, almost makes it feel like theatrical and a stage play, because like if the movie was going for realism when they're out on those beams, you'd be like, oh, it just looks so fake. It doesn't even feel like they're in real danger standing on those beams. Where's the wind? And it's like, no, it looks like it's on a stage, and they're not meant to feel in danger. It's about them in this moment, and that's really nice. But I love that moment about the art freezing time too, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think I'm going to make a video about it, just as like relationship to the work you make, and not to be presumptuous enough to call like what we're doing right now like a grand work of art or anything, but Like our discussion about this movie will be frozen as a moment in time. 10 years from now, we may have watched Megalopolis many times and have wildly different opinions on it, but this episode of our show will always be here, and it might even be someone's first exposure to us in 20 years. And what we are saying now will exist then as fresh to them as it does to us talking about it right now. And that is weird to think about. And the thought sparked in like just looking at our analytics, looking back and like people viewing old episodes of ours where it's like, oh, we gave this movie a pretty positive review, but like don't really like it anymore for a lot of reasons. It's like we talked about this 2.5 years ago. We're different people a little bit now. It's like, it's weird that there are like different versions of every creator put into the thing they make, and it's like a piece of them at that time. But that exists in a different state of, that moment of time will exist forever simultaneously to the current version of that person. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think about this pretty often as well, Dylan, where I'm just like, especially with like, just even like when you think about your own like Facebook page, like when it first came into existence, and like, because I see some memes online about like, oh, the TikTok creators being like, I'll put anything online, nothing is cringe for me, and I look at my Facebook post from 10 years ago, I'm like, oh god, I'm deleting that because that is so cringe. It is such a bad post, and it's like that's just the way that time is that over time you just forget what state of mind you were in when you wrote that or you created that. But yeah, I think about this all the time, and time is a fickle thing, and I think that is one of the things that they did well in this movie was talking about time slipping. You can't control time. Adam Driver's character can, but it's never fully explained how or why.
And I do like people did jokingly make the point, it's like he can stop time except for that one moment where he really should have stopped it to save his own life, and he doesn't. But I actually think he did, because in that moment after he's shot and before the Megalon is applied to him, which saves him, you do hear him saying like stop or something like that. So I think once he was shot, like he stopped time to sort of put himself in a stasis, until the Megalon could heal him. I don't know. But let's talk about let's talk about some weird shit though that's in this movie. Some weird or odd questionable things. First off, the subplot about Vesta, the virgin pop star, based on apparently this Vestal virgins thing was an ancient Greek thing, which is what they say in the movie. Why was this here? What is happening here?
I have no idea. This is so weird. Like, I like that she eventually becomes like this hard-edged like
that was
pop
funny.
Star.
Yes,
I liked that switch. But yeah, it's like, what is the point of this? Like, why is she in this movie, and why are we hyping this up so much?
And I think like narratively, it was meant to throw some doubt on Catalina in the community of New Rome and a fall from grace or whatever. But like this happens, and then they're like, oh, he gets arrested. Catalina does, because she's apparently 16, and there was this sex tape of them, and then Julia does some investigating and finds that, oh no, she actually wasn't 16, she's 23, and then also the video was doctored and they didn't have sex to begin with. And I fully admit I may be reading too much into the real world things of some of the people involved in this film and relationships they have in real life with a person named Victor Salva. But the fact that Catalina, who is in some ways a parallel to Coppola himself, is wrongfully accused of having sex with a minor and then vindicated, just feels really weird.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you pointed that out, because I was not even thinking of that when we were talking about the controversies earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That does put this in a different light, and I don't really like this light.
I don't either. And it's something that, and the reason it feels even more weird than it otherwise would, it's like, this story is introduced and then it's gone. They resolve the whole thing in like 15, 20 minutes or so, and it's never fucking mentioned again. So why was it here?
Yeah, it's an odd inclusion, and I think your analysis is more or less correct. I think another way that you could look at it too, because the Vesta scene, or that subplot happens in this big, entertainment arena. It's during this big
the
celebration.
Coliseum, yeah.
Yeah, it's in their Coliseum. It's during the celebration for the,
it's a wedding between
Crassus marrying
and Wow Platinum.
Wow Platinum and Crassus tying the knot. It's like this whole extravagant celebration for that. So I feel like another way that you could read it is, well, they're still like practicing these stupid games. They're still doing these stupid things. They still think like your virgin status is important and all this stupid bullshit. It's like, maybe it's like a way of saying, wow, the elite are really disconnected from reality.
Yeah. And it was also like just a weird thing, and maybe this is something that connects to like pop music culture from a past era or something, but like she had like this pledge to stay pure, and then it kept cutting around the stadium to all of the like old men who were going to support her pledge and donate money to help like fund the city or something, and it's like, what the fuck is this? I don't know. I like you. I liked the turn where like once she was like outed as an adult who has sex, she just like changes her entire aesthetic and style of music. That's funny. I like that. But the rest of it, I don't really like all that much.
Yeah, I don't really get it. And I feel like they were, I don't know what they were donating or raising funds for, but I also feel like they were all just like pledging as much money as they could, so that way they could marry her, like buy her, like auction her off. Like that's kind of one way that I was reading it, and it's gross in that regard too. But yeah, it's a weird subplot in this Megalopolis.
Yeah, it just felt like Coppola kind of throwing his hat in the ring at commenting on cancel culture via examining a sex crime that was fake. Yeah. I don't know. I don't like that. But another weird, not like as gross thing, other than the actor involved, I guess, is Dustin Hoffman's character. I feel like there was significant material for this guy that was cut because he's just kind of around for most of the movie, and then he goes to Cicero. It's almost like he's a fixer or something for the mayor.
Yeah.
And he's like, this Claudio guy, he's like stirring up a bit of a ruckus. I heard he was friends with your daughter. And Cicero's like, not a friend, an acquaintance, and he's a bad influence. And he's like, okay, I'll get rid of him. And then the next time we hear about him, not see him, we hear about him from Claudio later in the movie. It's like, oh, he's dead. And then we cut to a flashback of him being crushed under rubble, I guess, during the satellite crash. And it's like, what? I feel like there was meant to be a whole thing of him like trying to take out Claudio, and then the satellite interferes. Cicero gives Catalina the falsified evidence from the murder trial of Caesar's wife, and he says he can only do that now that, I forget what Hoffman's character is named, but now that he's gone. So that kind of implies that he had something to do with the falsified evidence for Catalina's wife's death. But that whole element of it is very confusing, because it's like, okay, well, she drove off the bridge. It seems like some people know that. But then he was accused of her murder. The body disappeared. there was a cover-up of some sort? What?
I could barely follow it because I'm just like, please spell it out for me. Like, someone, please.
Mm-hmm.
I'm as confused as you are about all that stuff.
Yeah.
One of the other things that, I mean, it wasn't super confusing, but the satellite crash, for me, was a confusing detail, or at least like strange, because they seem to make this big deal of it early in the movie of like, oh, this thing's gonna come crashing down, and it's kind of like, look at that gun on the wall, it's gonna be used later, like, look at it, it's there. They planted the seed that something big was coming later, and then it crashed, and the moment passed, and it felt very underwhelming to me. And I don't know, I feel like that was just really quick. What do you think?
No, I actually disagree, because I think it did two things. One, it cleared a lot of land in New York or New Rome for Megalopolis to be constructed, and also because it happened under Cicero's watch, it granted his rival Catalina more legitimacy in the eyes of the people as a leadership figure. Because the scene with where the guy from the audience is supposed to ask Catalina a question happens right after that. So I think that sort of thrust him into a leadership role. Another interesting thing about this is part of the reason this film was apparently delayed was Coppola wanted to release it at one point about 23 years ago. And I'm betting you can understand why maybe that did not happen.
Yeah, that would get in the way for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that clears up that confusion for me. I think that makes sense to me. But one of the other strange things about the plot too, for me at least, was the Megalon material.
Yeah.
Because they kept commenting, or at least there were multiple lines being like, "Oh, it's really groundbreaking material, but is it safe? Is it secure? Is it stable? Like, it's this magical building material that's Caesar created, but it's not really explored or elaborated on. Like, I feel like there's a lot of potential for this material, and like these lines are included, but then I'm expecting this pivotal point to come in the movie sometime where like buildings start collapsing or something similar, but it never came. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just in the minority there, but I think the Megalon should have been explored.
Yeah, and like you see it on Vesta's dress, right? And it makes her see-through, which is kind of fun. I do like how Caesar kind of jokes with the reporter. It's like, oh, it's devastating. We should all run. And you're like, nah, it's fine. It's totally safe. But
yeah, right.
it is sort of just a means to carry forward Caesar's mission, right? Like, it's not
for sure.
It's not really dwelled on much at all. It's just like, it's here. It can do what he wants it to do, and we're gonna move on.
That's fine, I guess.
Yeah, but like on the film, and talking about Caesar and the themes a little bit here, but Coppola said, quote, this in an interview, this steers me towards politics, and my publicist will yell at me if I start talking about politics. This movie won't cure our ills, but I honestly believe that what will save us is the fact that we've got to talk about the future. We want to be able to ask any questions we have to ask in order to really look at why this country is divided right now, and that's going to provide an energy that will defeat those people who want to destroy our republic. I made this film to contribute to that, and all I want is for this movie to start a conversation. You can't have a utopia without a conversation. Catalina expresses very similar sentiment in the film, and this is the concept I'm most referring to when I said earlier that the film has a lot less to say than it thinks it does. Because if you read Coppola's words back, what I just read, that says fucking nothing. That is the biggest load of nada ever. And I feel this way for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think the film itself really bothers to ask or explore any real questions. It rather has Caesar gesture at the idea of asking questions and talking about how important that is. And Caesar, in the text of the film, does whatever the fuck he wants. He does not seek the advice of the community or the people whose homes he's demolishing to build his utopia. He isn't engaging in some meaningful dialogue with the people of New Rome to come to a meaningful conclusion about the future. He just builds Megalopolis. Two, thinking about that above quote from Coppola, where he jokes about his publicist getting mad at him if he gets political, thinking about that a lot because the concept of creating a utopia is itself political. And beyond that, what that utopia ends up looking like is also political. Because what you picture when you picture utopia will be informed by your politics and beliefs. And I think there might have been a reluctance for some reason to say much about politics, and I think that is to this film's detriment, because all it ends up saying is that we need to start a conversation and ask questions. I want this film to ask me a question or to assert something, and I don't think it does either. How do you feel about all that?
Conflicted, definitely, because I agree. I feel like, Caesar gave a lot of speeches throughout that was like, we need to ask questions. We need to look inwardly at ourselves, at humanity, and we can see that there's kindness and there's love, etc., etc. And it's like, these are all great fluff words, and they're great buzzwords. But what is the conversation? What is the dialogue that you want us to have, Caesar? And what's the conversation that you want us to have, Mr. Coppola? It is. I think if there was a question that he was posing, it was, just about the trajectory of mankind. Like, where are we headed, and how can we avoid heading towards a cataclysm? But it's not really like very on the nose. It's just like, oh no, I want to build my megalopolis. That's kind of it.
And I think like it feels so like stupid of me to say like someone who is much older and has lived much more life is saying something naive, but it's like you have to be savvy enough to understand that not everyone participating in the conversation about our republic and our institutions is doing so in good faith and doing so in order to pursue a greater understanding or a preservation of things that are good. A lot of people are simply self-interested or just have really backwards views about certain things. And you need to, sure, talk to them in the way you can, but don't pretend that just the act of asking questions and discussing leads to utopia. If you aren't prepared for a real conversation, you're going to get outplayed and you're going to fall in line behind some fucking horrible cause. Like we see it in this movie, actually, like the people who Catalina displaces, they become like Nazis under like Claudio's little regime. Like he just plays them to spite his cousin, I guess, that's and become the heir to the bank. And he tricks all these people into becoming so Coppola seems aware of the existence of bad actors and stuff like that, but still the message of the film rings empty because Catalina doesn't say much to me, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I agree there. And something else that popped in my head too while you were just talking about that is in this movie we have an elected official and an unelected entrepreneur who are like trying to decide the future of this country. And one of them is posed as very corrupt and stuck in the past, and the other one is more idealistic and ambitious and looking towards the future. And that's just got me thinking about our modern world, and I'm like, well, who is that equivalent? Well, I feel like that's Elon Musk versus like government officials, and
Yeah.
I am always going to trust my elected government officials, like people who are public servants,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that they're going to always have my best interests in mind over Mr. Mega Billionaire on
Yeah.
the other side of the table who is just like, yeah, I want to build a rocket to put me into space kind
Mm-hmm.
of deal. It's like, really, dude? Are you
And
really looking out for my best interests?
and why do you trust the public official over the rich billionaire who,
Mm-hmm.
because the people, in theory, came together and chose the elected official through a dialogue and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
A
but
dialogue.
like, and that dovetails nicely into just Catalina and this having a dialogue thing. To that point, I think the way his vision, Catalina's, is resolved feels weird regarding what it seems to say and how it contrasts with the stated importance of dialogue and conversation about the future. Because, like, in rhetoric, Catalina talks about the societal meeting of the minds, but in practice, he just bulldozes a ton of people's homes without asking and builds his city more or less isolated from the rest of the community. So it creates this weird tension between the stated theme and what the story actually shows, because rather than a dialogue leading us into the future, New Rome is led into the future by an eccentric architect operating with no oversight who invented
Mm-hmm.
a mysterious magical metal that only he understands, and he's also the heir to a wealthy banker who magnanimously donates all of his fortune to this project. It feels very in for a story that is so much about the collective coming together of people. The resolution is so individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's because Catalina he's right because he's the fucking best, and he made the magic metal, which will solve all of the problems in society. Somehow, it's just a very, it's a very guy who is stoned solution to solving society. It's like, well, we just like, I can do it, just give me this thing, give me unlimited resources, and I'll make a city, and you can stand on the conveyor belt and you'll go. It just it's like, and going back to like the idea of previous versions of this story, and I've seen it speculated elsewhere too, but I feel like there has to be an earlier version of this narrative where Catalina's grand vision does not work out because it just feels so paternalistic. And Catalina himself, and this ties into the Rome and Greek presentation of everything, he feels like a tragic Greek hero who, at the end of the story, ultimately fails as a result of a fatal flaw. Like, that is so common in Greek mythology, and he feels like that type of character.
Yes.
I almost think it would have been more in line with the theme of the movie if Catalina actually died when he gets shot. And then Megalopolis is, instead of how it happens in the movie, but created through this collective effort by the people of New Rome. They come together in the aftermath of his death and realize the true vision of the city that he never could because he was just one man. They have a conversation and they build it together instead of him just doing it,
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that idea. Because, him being shot and dying from that gun wound would have turned him into a martyr. Like an
which is what Claudio says would happen, and it doesn't.
It doesn't, because he lived. He doesn't become a martyr, but if he did, his death would have been the impetus for this deeper dialogue that we were alluding to about utopia and about the future of society, civilization, how everyone can come together. And I think that would have been a better ending. I agree, because if we're just going to say at the end of the movie, the Roman emperor, he did his job and he got everything trucking along and he achieved his goal. It's like, okay, what next? How does this, the people need to have agency, I think, in this film, and they should have had more agency.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know if this was intentional by Coppola or not, but like there is the sentiment in our world. It's very common that like a rich genius will save us, you know. And newsflash, they won't. They will not. They don't care about you or me or any of us. They care about themselves. There is no real life Tony Stark. Tony Stark actually saved the world and fucking died. None of our billionaires are going to do that for us, guys.
Oh yeah.
Sorry to invoke a Marvel movie in a review of a Coppola movie. I know he does not like them. I apologize. But it's like, yeah, the resolution
right.
is the rich banker is just like, oh, I'm a nice guy, and I'm going to give it all to my nephew because this city is dope.
Thank God I'm a good-natured person, and I'm not just looking out for my best interests and chasing a high.
Yeah, and being outrageously horny and multiple conversations about his dick. But speaking of Crassus the banker, one of the funniest fucking parts in the movie. Do you want to talk about this?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's the best scene in the entire movie. I think it's so funny because it's this scene where Wow Platinum and Claudio they're conspiring together to take the bank away from Crassus. Basically, they're like getting him off the board and everything, but Crassus has caught on. He's caught on.
He's like faking. He's like faking a stroke for the last like couple weeks or something.
Yeah, they come into his room and they're like, "Oh, we're here to pay our like last respects," and he fucking shoots them with 3 arrows.
Well, wait. What does he do first? What does he do before?
Oh, yes. He pretends to have a boner, an erection. He's like, "Hey, look at this. Look at this. Isn't this great?" And he's hiding it under the cover, and they think it's a joke. And then he's like, "Nope." Whips off the blanket and just fucking...
He shoots Aubrey Plaza right here.
I couldn't stop laughing for like 2 minutes in the movie theater. I thought that was hilarious.
It's so funny. And it's like a little tiny bow too. It's like a little like
yeah. It's not even like a crossbow or something with like strength. It's like this old man holding it up and the funniest part too was just like how long their reactions take. Like he like takes like 3 full seconds to like pull off the blanket, pull up the bow, and he's like drawing it back, says a line, and then fires it. It's like, why were you still standing there?
And he shoots Shia LaBeouf in the ass twice.
Yeah,
and I have to think like because the bow was like so tiny and he shoots him in the butt, like it's a Cupid thing. I don't know.
Oh yeah,
what that has to do with anything, but also another note of the scene: Crassus is still in his costume that he wears earlier in the movie, which is a Robin Hood costume. What did Robin Hood do? He robbed from the rich to feed the poor, which I guess is what Crassus does at the end.
Yeah, I guess at the end he kind of, in a way, he's not letting the money go to like just.
He's such a baffling character. He's just half of the scenes. He's just like around, looking confused or being really drunk. He's very horny and marries Wow Platinum, who was Caesar's mistress before. And I don't know, but there are a lot of funny moments in this movie. We did it earlier, but Adam Driver's delivery of the like go back to the club is great. Also another great Adam Driver moment is when Wow Platinum like meets him in the park in the snow, and she's like, just take me back and I'm gonna steal the bank and give it to you, and then just the double meaning of the line too, but Caesar's just like, wow, and walks away.
That was so great. And yeah, Wow Platinum, Aubrey Plaza's character, kudos to her because she's so funny in this movie.
She's so like, absurd.
Such a good bright spot. And like Aubrey Plaza, she was the perfect person to cast in this role. She plays such a great gold digger type character.
Yeah, and the scene with her and Julia in the elevator of Crassus's mansion is pretty funny too.
Yeah. Everything's mine. Everything's mine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's funny.
Yeah.
Well, Dylan, would you recommend Megalopolis?
So I would say if you like film, you like filmmaking, you should make an effort to watch this in theaters. Based on how it's doing financially, I do not expect it will be there long. So go while you can. I don't know whether it is something I would say most people will enjoy as entertainment, although it is very funny, as we were just talking about. But it is formally experimental on a budget and scale that would not normally see this level of experimentation. And it is the passion project of an incredibly skilled and legendary director. I'd say, like, you don't have to like it, but you should see it. What about you?
I get that. I'm kind of in the same boat with you, because I don't think I'd really recommend this to most audiences, but I acknowledge this movie is very competently crafted, and I believe I liked it overall.
Yeah.
But I do think that it spreads itself too thin, and it doesn't fully deliver on what it kind of promises to, I would say. But yeah, if you're very into filmmaking and you want to make films, then you should probably see this movie, because there's a lot of like interesting techniques, like some of these scenes we were talking about with just like scene composition, shot composition, and the lighting, the visuals, everything like that. There's a lot to learn here from Coppola.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is Megalopolis. So we'll transition to the last section of our show, talk about some other stuff for a little bit. Niles, what have you been up to recently?
Great British Bake Off is back, so I've been starting to watch that again. Always such a fun show, and they always kick off the seasons with some stupid sketch, like just like a parody of something. And this year it's Barbie, and I'm like, they sure did try. They were really late to the party, though. It's over a year now since Barbie came out, so it's like, but I get it. Filming and everything, they probably had the idea like very, very early this year to do that, but it's fun. It's a good show.
Right. Well, and they probably filmed the last season before Barbie came out, so it would like...
Yeah, probably. Yeah, exactly. My partner started watching that Perfect Couple show on Netflix. Like, I think that's the name of it. It's like Dave Bautista and Nicole Kidman. Kind of got White Lotus vibes in a way. Where it's like there's a marriage or like everyone's attending, like, it's a wedding, and then someone gets murdered at the wedding the day before it happens. So that's kind of just a whole mystery about that. And I've just been kind of watching over the shoulder, so I don't know all the details, but it is actually, I think I would recommend that if you're into those kinds of shows. It looks fun, and I've enjoyed the scenes that I've watched. And I actually watched a fascinating documentary recently called The Last Tourist. I don't know if I've mentioned it in these previous 2 episodes that we did, but I definitely recommend it because it's on Hulu, and it provides a comprehensive view or perspective on the negative aspects of the tourism industry, but also just like the tourism industry as a whole. Yeah. And I learned so many things about it, but I think it's actually a very great film to mention on this episode, because we were just talking about with Megalopolis. There's this whole area that he's building up in the city that's just going to be Megalopolis, and feels like it's a city within a city that's kind of more isolationist and exclusive and stuff like that. And in The Last Tourist, they talk about resorts. And resort culture, how it's like they're hoarding all these resources, and all the money stays within the resort and doesn't get out to the locals, and it's really fucks up these communities.
Right, because that's the whole sales pitch of tourism to these communities, right? It's like, oh, it'll boost the economy because all these new people come in and buy from you. But in resorts, it's like, oh, no, they don't leave the resort, so No.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And they tell them like, don't go off the resort. Don't go. It's dangerous out there. Don't go out there. But it's like, it's fine if you know what you're doing. Probably. Like, I'm sure that there's some areas that are more dangerous than others. But yeah, the resorts are always just gonna discourage you from leaving. Keep you contained
because they make more money.
Exactly, and all the money just stays in their little economy. And there's a lot of other aspects too that they talk about, like animal cruelty and commercial travel and stuff like that. But I definitely recommend it. Check it out. But that's it for me. Dylan, what have you been up to?
So carrying on reading Dune Messiah, enjoying that a whole lot. I think a little under 2/3 of the way through the book at this point. It's
nice.
It's very different than the first Dune. Like, it is kind of a royal court drama more than the adventure of the first book. Like, so far, I think the entire book has taken place inside Muad'Dib's palace on Dune. So it's like, I can kind of understand why people who love the first book don't love the second one quite as much. Also, there's the part where Paul compares himself to Hitler, which I think took people off guard back in the day when they didn't realize that Paul was like, not a good guy, which is part of the reason Herbert wrote Dune Messiah in the first place. Is like, the first book ended and everybody's like, "Go, Paul! Go get him, boy!" And then it's like, he's like, "What? No!
I need to spell it out clearly for you idiots."
he like has Stilgar like read up on history. It's like, I want you to study some past emperors. Like, read up on Genghis Khan, and there's this guy called Hitler. I want you to read about him too.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So, yeah, good book, though, and I'm carrying on with Rings of Power, which the last episode last week, the finale of Season 2 is coming up tomorrow, actually, as we're recording this. But last episode was so good. It was the, like, climactic battle of the season. There's so much stuff, like, great stuff between this character. I mean, if you know the Lord of the Rings lore, you know that Sauron in disguise like works with this elf named Celebrimbor to forge the rings. And we have gotten to see that relationship throughout this season. And
cool.
It's the guy who plays Celebrimbor specifically. God, I hope he gets nominated for an Emmy or something. He's so amazing. And it's like, you just know in your heart, even if you don't know like Tolkien lore, you're just like, oh man, it's not gonna work out for you, man. Like, I feel
tragic character.
But the guy who plays Sauron / Anatar is the name of the disguise is brilliant as well. There's so many little nuances to his performance. I know you haven't watched the show yet. I would really recommend you do it. The first season is a little uneven, but season 2 has been really solid.
Good to
hear. Also, The Penguin, episode 2, great. Really enjoying that so far. Great extension of the Batman universe, playing on mobster movies and shows of the past, and Colin Farrell's makeup is like brilliant.
Nice.
Also, Only Murders in the Building, delightful as always. And I can't remember if I finished it before our last episode or not, but I finished the Star Wars Outlaws game. Great Star Wars adventure, loved that. I also went to see The Substance, starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. Very fun movie. It is basically Demi Moore plays sort of an actress, TV star person who is getting aged out of the show she's been on for a long time. She's 50 and she doesn't want to lose her career. And she's approached by someone who's like, okay, you are a great candidate for this thing called The Substance. And when you take it, a younger version of you is birthed out of you, and you are supposed to switch places with them every 7 days, and you can live this life as the younger you, half of the time, but you have to follow the rules. And maybe they don't totally follow the rules, and things start going crazy.
Cool. I need to see that. That sounds fun.
It's some fun body horror. It's pretty funny. It's obviously a commentary on how the entertainment industry treats women as they get older, and replaces them with, younger counterparts meant to fill similar roles. And then also this weekend, I went to see The Wild Robot. It's apparently a children's book trilogy, and the movie stars Lupita Nyong'o, I believe. And it is delightful and wonderful and sweet. I liked it so much. But that's it. So that's all I've done.
Nice.
And that's going to do it for the show.
Yeah.
We'll see y'all back in 2 weeks for another episode. We haven't decided what we're going to do it on yet. I think we're not going to do the Joker, though. So
sorry, guys. Sorry. We'll see what we're doing. Hopefully maybe something spooky for spooky season. But yes, thank you all so much for tuning in, listening, watching, and we hope that you enjoyed this episode with us, because we enjoyed talking about it.
Yeah, this was a fun one. Niles, where can people find you online?
On Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. What about you, Dylan? Where can people follow you online?
On Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at DDay Movies, on YouTube at DDay Movies. You can find both of us here at Play Pause Rewind on your podcast platform of choice, and on YouTube. You can also find us on our second channel, Play Pause Rewind Videos. There we post spoiler-free parts of the episodes, as well as our Rewind series, and anything else we ever make will go there. But yeah, we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. See y'all next time. Goodbye.
Bye.